welcome to another R tutorial video. In the previous video we saw, maybe to our surprise, that some players have are a lot more consistent in their scoring than others. Specifically, we found that LeBron James had a very small, or relatively small, I'll say relatively small standard deviation in his points per game, whereas Carmelo Anthony had a very large standard deviation in his points per game. And what I'm going to show you in this video is how to visualize that a little bit better, both for yourself and if you want to communicate this to somebody else, particularly someone that really doesn't have a great handle on statistics. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to start off. I'm going to start off by loading the data set. I'm going to also format the game date field like I always have to, and I'm also going to subset to only look at the regular season games. I'm going to put the names of the fields in the data set because I might refer to it later. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to load a package that I've already installed called ggplot2. I believe I have a couple of videos on this, but basically what ggplot is it's a R package that is good at graphics and visualizing your data. And the great thing about ggplot is that I think the syntax is very easy to understand. You can use it to build really complex graphs if you need to. But the syntax is really simple, and it's really you're building one simple block at a time. So it's just really a well thought out package in my opinion. Okay, so I don't know if I've done it yet. Now I've loaded the ggplot2 package. Okay, so the players that I want to compare are LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a character vector with these two players in there. I don't necessarily have to make the character vector first, but for style's sake, I'm going to do it. Hopefully, it makes my code a little bit easier to read. At least that's the idea. I'm going to create a data frame, comp2pdf, which is comparing two players data frame. That's essentially what it's going to stand for. It's going to be a subset of the regular season data frame. And I'm going to subset based on if the player is in that player's character vector that I created. And so, in a few words, I'm subsetting the regular season data set, and I'm only including the games in which LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony played. Okay, so actually I don't think I've run either of these lines yet, so I'm going to run them now. Oops. Okay, a little bit of a typo there. _df. There we go. Okay, now I'm ready, and let me just run the head function real quick on this, just to make sure that it looks like what I expect. This step isn't necessary, but I like to do this every once in a while just to make sure the changes that I do have done what I expect. And so far it looks like it's doing what I want. It only has LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, and the play of indicator 0 everywhere. So I feel pretty good about that. I'm going to get rid of the head function. You don't need it anymore. Okay. Now this ggplot function is, as I'm sure you guessed, it's part of the ggplot2 package. The first argument that goes in here is the data frame that I want to graph in some way. I'm going to use the aesthetic function. Now let me talk through the kind of graph that I'm visualizing in my head before I actually create it. What I would like to do is create a histogram that shows a distribution of points for each of these players. And I'd like to position the histograms in a way so that I can compare the spread of Carmelo Anthony's points per game versus the spread of LeBron James's. And the logical way to do that is to stack one on top of the other. That way I could see really easily which one's wider and which one's narrower. Depending on what you're trying to do, with other graphs you might position in a different way, but that's essentially what I think is going to be the best way to display this information that I'm trying to convey. Okay, so what that x equals points essentially means is that the x-axis of these histograms is going to be the points scored in a particular game. So I'm going to run that. Now, if you look at it, if you know anything about the ggplot2 syntax, I've created kind of like a graphics object right now, but I haven't really told it what kind of graph I want to do yet. I haven't told it if I'm going to do it, like a bar chart or a line chart or anything like that. So I have to do that. I don't have to do it in this step, but I'm going to go ahead and do it in this step. You have to do it, before you actually plot it, at the very least. So geom histogram. Now, when you create a histogram, what it essentially does is for each of the observations, it's going to put them into a particular bucket. Now, if the x-axis is continuous, like it is in this case, you have to tell it how wide each of those buckets are going to be. Actually, ggplot will guess and come up with a bin width on its own, but usually I think it's the best practice to figure out a logical bin width on your own before you actually make the plot. And I'm going to try 5 points just to see what that's like. I'm going to run it. Next, I'm going to use this feature called facet grid, and what this will do is it'll split up. It's going to, let me type out actually the whole syntax before I explain it. What this is going to do is it's going to break out the 2 histograms, and it's going to break it down by player. Since I only have 2 players, it's going to simply do one histogram on top of the other. But that's what this facet grid function will do, is it'll add a part to my plot that will break up the histograms in this way. So let me kind of recap on what 10, 11, and 12 these lines are doing up in my source code. So the way ggplot works is you make a you make a ggplot object, and whenever you want to do changes or additions, add features to the object, you essentially are just adding on pieces of the graph. And once you have all the pieces added together, then you can just plot it here at the bottom. Now, I should mention, I really haven't given you a complete overview of the ggplot2 package. What I think is the best way to learn ggplot2 is to play with it on your own, to look at some examples and then kind of get an intuitive sense of what ggplot2 is capable of and some of the syntax behind it. To help you guys do that, I'm going to include a link to the documentation at the bottom. What's great about this documentation is there's lots and lots of examples, and they're simple examples. They aren't really too complex or anything, so you can get an idea of how to add things and change things. So I'm going to include that link for you guys at the bottom. I encourage you, if you want to use this package, to look at that documentation and read through it. So now getting back to this graph, I've done everything that I need. I'm going to run P, and whoops, this is not right. Oh, I forgot to do facet grid. That's what the problem is. So I'm going to just so I don't confuse you guys, I'm going to start up on line 10, and I'm going to run all these lines again. 11, 12. 12 is the one I forgot last time. And let's graph it again. Okay, that's what we were expecting. And I'm going to zoom in so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, there it is zoomed in. So let me talk about a few things in these graphs. As you can see, we clearly see 2 histograms, one on top of the other. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see the players' names are listed. Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James. That's exactly what we expected based on our facet grid portion that we added to this plot. Also, what else you notice about these 2 histograms is one is kind of short and wide, one is narrower and taller. And of course, I'm talking about Carmelo Anthony's is the wider one, LeBron James is the narrower one. And this really displays what we were hoping to display. That Carmelo Anthony, he can, sometimes he has, relative to LeBron James, he has some more off games, but there's some games where he just really lights it up, and he has like 40 and 40-point games a lot more often than LeBron James does. LeBron James, he never really gets on fire quite like Carmelo Anthony, but he doesn't really have those off games either. He's kind of Mr. Consistent. He's always hanging around his same points per game average. So it's great. This plot showed us exactly what we were expecting and what we wanted to show. I just closed the plot down. What's great about the fact that I have everything documented up here in the source is if I wanted to do this kind of analysis with different players, it is the easiest thing in the world to do and to do quickly. Let's say instead of comparing LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, I wanted to compare LeBron James and Kobe Bryant. I mean, that's as simple as typing in Kobe Bryant's name and running the same lines that I ran before. And I'll zoom it out just so we can see. And now instead of comparing Carmelo Anthony to LeBron James, we're comparing Kobe Bryant's spread to LeBron James. Here we see a lot of the same. Kobe Bryant has a lot wider range. Sometimes he has off games, but sometimes he has games where he's absolutely on fire. Whereas LeBron James, relative to Kobe Bryant, is more of Mr. Consistency. I'll shut that down. Another thing you can do is you can play around this bin width too. If you wanted to try like bin width, let's say 8 instead. I'll go ahead and run these lines again. And the graph looks a little bit different when you do that, so you might play around with the bin width, trying to figure out which one shows what you're trying to show and things like that. Also, you can even go even further back if you wanted to look at how somebody does in the playoffs versus how they do in the regular season. That capability is here as well because we already have all that data in there. So number one, hopefully you've seen how to graph a little bit in R, and hopefully I've introduced you to the ggplot2 package and encourage you guys to check it out more. And number two, I think hopefully I've given you guys a sense of how to play around with your data, slice it in different ways. Once you look at it one way in R, it's very easy to just change a couple lines of code and then hit the run button and see how that visually changes your data. So I'm going to stop it here for now, but I plan on doing a lot more of this kind of analysis with the NBA data and hopefully maybe even taking it several steps further. But that's all the time I have for now. I'm going to call it a day, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.